we all realized that the government started kicking in and with the HITECH Act many years ago, electronic health records, which is where I'm from. We were used to building in silos. All we had to do was make sure we stayed within your four walls and gave you what you asked for, and there was really nothing beyond that. And so then we got in this conundrum when the government started walking in and saying, okay, we want everyone to talk. Well, we tried it, and we all tried our separate way of talking. And we had HL7, of course, which was helping us, but most recently with the new movement towards an HL7 situation called FIRE, and then also USCDI, which deals more with the content and the standardization of content. That's the way we're going to get there. It will take mandates. It always does. And so let me just explain to you what the conundrum is that we're really dealing with as an industry. And the best way I can explain this is if I put it in a restaurant scenario. So you're sitting in a restaurant, the waiter comes up and he says, okay, what would you like to order? You've got your menu, and on your menu, you decide you want to order a hamburger. So you said, like a hamburger, well done, pickles, onions, tomato, lettuce. The waiter carries it back to the back where your chef is, and the chef takes that order and he creates your hamburger. Now, the way FIRE works, it kind of carries that. That's the best way I can explain it is FIRE. It's kind of like it builds these APIs where we all have to talk in a language that we understand. Now, the way UCDI, also the way FIRE works is, let's say I say I'd like to have pickles, onions, tomato, lettuce, and a well-done hamburger. But I forgot to say please. So I'm sitting there for 2 hours and I'm not getting anything back because the language that I used didn't have please in it. The standard wasn't there. So no matter how much I beg for that burger, I'm not going to get it. That's the same way it is for your vendors. When we try to talk to each other, if we don't have the please in there, some vendors want please, some vendors don't want please. Then that's when you start having that language barrier and we can't share. Now, whenever 2015 certification kicked in, they put that in there where we're now going to have to start speaking the exact same language. And that's just the easiest way of breaking it down. But it goes a step further. And this is where it really hits us in the world of ophthalmology. And that is the core data. That's USCDI. So with USCDI, it tells you actually what you're going to call something. Are you going to call it tomato or tomato? Okay? And it also tells you if you don't, everyone doesn't call it the same thing, then you're still not going to be able to give what you need to give to the other vendor. It's a standard, that's the standardization part of this whole scenario. And the beautiful thing about it is you all can actually go and you can give them some of your ideas. There's a format that you have to go through. We're already working on intraocular pressure, visual acuity, some of the basics. Mm-hmm. It's not been released yet, and it's not been mandated yet. But we can change that. That's really the bridge, in my opinion, of how we're going to all get to AI and we're all going to get to interoperability is that standardization. And it is basically like eating the whole white elephant one bite at a time, and it's interim.
Now, you were mentioned to me earlier that the USDI, the standards for ophthalmology are still in flux. It sounds like a perfect time for us as an industry to lean forward and have some input rather than it coming.
We're working on it, yes.
Mm-hmm.
There is,
who is we?
Well, anybody can actually go in and proposal of what they like. I think we're on version 3 right now on UCDI. I'm not quite sure. I believe that is. I think it's closed. But because I said it's interim, we can all go in there. If you have the technical background and you can write out what it is that you're proposing, it'll be reviewed, and then they decide whether or not they're going to approve it.
Is that something that Zeiss and J&J and Alcon and everybody is involved in? Because it was new to me today when we were talking about this. It just seems like an opportunity, and ophthalmology usually leads if we know about it.
Yeah.
Ranya?
Yes.
Yeah, no. I mean, look, this is a push in the entire industry. So we don't have to go down rabbit holes of compliance and security and all this other stuff. I mean, the take-home message is everything is moving towards standardized, input of data, which makes it much easier for us to identify and then work with the data. And I think another big point is that nowadays we don't have to share our individual data in order to gather insights from it, which is, I think, a really big point because that's what scares all the different companies, right? But now with the federated, systems, that's not an issue. So the point is that everything is moving towards this greater collaboration, and I think I'd like to step back for a minute and just look at kind of the big picture of things here and like how things work together. How do you get patient-reported information? How do you get it into the surgical system? How does that translate into post-op data? How does that go through the EMR? And then how does that give data and insight back to our strategic partners who are trying to make better decisions about their products?
I agree. We just have to make sure that we say the same language and call the data the same thing. So
yeah, that's already there. So there's nothing.
Yeah, I think that you can say it's already there, but I don't know whether everybody's playing. I think that we need to make sure that it is a standard, and from an ophthalmologist, I expect it.
Yeah.
Okay, I expect it of the industry to not silo this out because there's an opportunity, just like we did with DICOM and HL7 and things. We just really have to get there, and we need to require it as an industry because it'll be a stumbling block otherwise.
I think I go along with Ranya. We want it. We most certainly run it, but some systems contain 50,000 data points, and so that's 50,000 data points that need to be standardized, basically. So
well, for instance, you think about the Microsoft system, that ingests data that is within that standard. And if it's not, then it structures it so that it does look the same. I mean, so those things are sort of in the background right now. There's also a push by the FDA to standardize imaging so that it's all DICOM standard imaging instead. But do you have anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitively driving that as much as we can. We recognize the value of it to our customers, and we don't want to operate in a way that doesn't enable that kind of data sharing. We recognize there's huge value, not just from an efficiency standpoint, but also ultimately from a clinical standpoint. Moving data to the cloud is a massive opportunity to aggregate data and develop new insights that have never been seen before, and they are there, and they come from not just inside the ophthalmology industry, but ophthalmology connected to other branches of healthcare and medicine as well. We know the way that sort of analyzing the retina to indicate various other clinical conditions is going, and that can't happen unless there's a broad ability to share data in the same format. So I feel, honestly, we've passed the point where standardization of data formats is an option. I don't actually see an awful lot of pushback. We know ophthalmology, and I think Jim mentioned this earlier on, is a great environment for sharing and collaboration. And I think ophthalmology will probably lead the field in healthcare in sort of driving that kind of collaborative approach.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think at the same time with that standardization comes choice, right? Because surgeons still want choice, patients want choice, and it's about getting our surgeons the insights that they may not have had otherwise. So giving them information when they need it to make better decisions to get the better outcomes. It's about even going further upstream and giving patients information that they can then make more informed decisions. We talk about expectation setting being so important for outcomes and patient satisfaction. So how do we help even further up the journey to help set those right expectations with patients so that when they come into the system that you're looking at behind us, they're already more informed. And I think there's so many pain points along the way, just even outside of the OR, where we can really help influence.
I think one thing that comes up from the physician groups that I work with is an age-old question of who owns the data. So, Ranya, you want to start that one?
I mean, to me, this is easy. I know that Tara's going to disagree.
I'm not going to do it.
But the patient owns data, period. It's data sovereignty. This is their data. If they choose to share it with you, that's their prerogative. So, to me, I think we make way too much of this. It's not the EMR system. It's not the physician. It is the patient, in my mind.
You would like that to be true.
See?
But the reality of it is HIPAA law covers only 18 points within the database that are PHI. So when you de-identify or remove those PHI data points, the data is no longer considered patient protected or patient ownership. That's whenever you start having the data that can be sold to different data banks and things like that. And so there is no legality that actually set, now some states do have some things that are written in, but nationally, PHI is protected with 18 data points that you can de-identify. There's 2 ways to identify it according to HIPAA. And then once it's de-identified, it's no longer considered patient. It's considered data.
Right, but I'm going to 100% back Ranya up on this one. I mean, the patient owns the data. Certainly there are ways of de-identifying, and that can be somewhat of a loophole. But I don't think that's where globally the field is headed. I think, and even those loopholes in the future hopefully will be shut. The patient is at the center of their own health. I think that's internationally being recognized. And I know as we put our health data platform together, we've designed it so that it's a patient-centric data platform. And if you don't do that, I think you run into the problems that probably every physician here has experienced, where patients ask for their data, it's got to be delivered, but if it's embedded in a health record system that isn't patient-centric, it can be really hard to extract it. Referral becomes a problem because then are you granting access to somebody else's data? And you're really only, as a physician, the curator of that patient's data. You're not the owner of that patient's data. Mm-hmm. So when you start with a different type of philosophy, you open up all sorts of possibilities for collaboration and streamlined operation, where you have a patient-centric database, and referral really becomes that patient then granting access to a different physician for a particular procedure. But they can remain in control of it, and that will be the future. That's certainly the way we're designing our system, and I 100% agree with you.
I think one thing, obviously perception is reality, but if you look at the physician's standpoint, and I talk to them all the time, is they say, I don't want company X to see my data. Mm-hmm. Right. So 2 things wrong with that. Number one, it's not their data. Right. Mm-hmm. But they feel like, especially when it has to do with their surgical outcomes, it has to do with their complication rates or other things, I think that we've got a lot of education to do at the physician level to kind of say it is the patient data. Mm-hmm. And therefore, if, especially with all this surgical planning software, which seems to be the central of everybody's area, then tying in with the digital equipment and then going backwards to the, there's resistance at the ophthalmology level right now in this data sharing glaring area, and I think we've got a lot of work to do on that.
But I think that comes back on onus on us to demonstrate value, right? So that mindset to me also indicates that we haven't really shown the value of what this data can provide them.
And that's the reason that the data itself, the government, the way they see that, and I feel like I'm the antagonist, but I already told you that I was.
That's your job.
So yeah, that's my job. But the reality of it is the government's not protecting it, so there's no law in place that actually protects anything but those 18 PHI points, including when you de-identify, they can still keep the doctor's name attached to it. And re-identification is pretty darn easy considered now the Internet of Things where everything's connected. So we have to change the law. HIPAA doesn't cover the patient in that part legally. We as a company, by the way, just for full disclosure, we don't sell data. We don't believe in it. We don't like the whole threat with the de-identification, re-identification with Internet of Things. So we have taken the hard stance of we're not selling data. But not all companies do that. So when you look at your contract, you want to make sure within your contract you say, you have no ability, I do not give you the right to use the data from my database.
Ranya? Ranya?
Well, I mean, look, again, I think we should stop going down these particular rabbit holes, and we need to step back and look at the entire system. What does it actually look like? Why are we even doing this session? We're doing it because we want to put all the moving parts together and show everyone what a real connected system looks like. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that was kind of where I, kind of as we get to, we've got about